What if the one person standing between your child and death was the same person you destroyed 2 years ago? Not a stranger, not someone you'd never met, someone you looked at, dismissed, lied about, and erased, and then walked away from without a second thought. What if karma didn't just knock on your door? What if it sat down across from you in a hospital conference room and said her name out loud? I want you to sit with that image for a second, because this story is about exactly that. It's about a woman who had everything: power, money, respect, and how a single drop of saline on an expensive shoe set in motion something she could never have seen coming. And it's about another woman, quiet, steady, and good to her core, who had every right in the world to say no. Every single right. Stay with me, because what unfolds between these two women over 22 months will change the way you look at every person you pass today without really seeing. The room smelled like hand sanitizer and old flowers. Vivian stood at the 7th-floor window of a large regional hospital in Atlanta and watched the scene below her with the calm expression of someone who had already moved on. Down in the parking lot, a nurse was pushing a cart toward her car. A small cardboard box sat in her arms. The nurse didn't look up. She just kept moving, chin down, steps quiet and steady even now. Vivian recognized the walk, but she didn't linger on it. She turned away from the window. The city skyline stretched out behind her, glittering and indifferent, and she was already thinking about the quarterly budget meeting that started in 12 minutes. She had no idea that in less than 2 years, she would be in this same hospital, on her knees, begging that woman to save her daughter's life. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how a story like this happens, how a woman that accomplished, that intelligent, that driven could be the architect of her own undoing, you have to understand who Vivian was. Not the surface version, the real one. She had not been handed a single thing. Her parents came from nothing and gave everything. Her father drove a taxi for 22 years in Atlanta heat and Atlanta rain and Atlanta traffic, so his daughter could one day sit in rooms where the decisions were made. Her mother cleaned office buildings until her knees gave out, never once complaining, just doing what needed to be done. They were people who understood sacrifice the way most people understand breathing, not as something noble, but as something necessary. Vivian had watched them and absorbed a singular message. Work harder than anyone thinks you can, climb higher than anyone expects you to, and don't stop. She didn't. She went from a tiny apartment in East Point to a corner office with a view of the Midtown skyline. She ran a health foundation. She raised millions for cancer research. She sat on 3 boards. She wore Chanel to Monday morning meetings and Dior to Friday galas. She had fought for every inch of her life, and she had won. And somewhere in the process of winning, she had stopped being able to see the people around her. Her husband, Desmond, tried to tell her. They were eating dinner one evening in their home in Buckhead, just the two of them, their daughter Serena upstairs studying. And Desmond set down his fork and said quietly, almost gently, the way you say something you've been holding for a while, "Viv, you don't talk to people anymore. You talk at them." Vivian didn't look up from her phone. She was reading an email about the hospital's quarterly budget. "That's how things get done, Desmond." He picked up his plate and walked to the kitchen alone. "That's how things get broken," he said. But she was already gone. Not physically, just the way people go somewhere else inside themselves, and the person still sitting at the table is really just a body with a phone. That was the woman Vivian had become. Not cruel for the thrill of it. Not calculating in the way of villains in movies. Just so far above everyone else that she had forgotten completely what it felt like to stand below. And that is its own. Kind of dangerous, maybe the most dangerous kind, because people like that never see the damage coming. They don't feel the weight of what they do, so they keep doing it until they can't. At the hospital, Vivian moved through the halls like she owned them because, in every practical sense, she did. She didn't say good morning to the nurses. She didn't know the janitors' names. She walked past them the way you walk past furniture, not hostile, just completely unseeing. The doctor smiled when she entered a room, not from warmth, but from self-preservation. Everyone at that hospital knew the quiet truth. If you got on Vivian's wrong side, your career at that institution was finished. Everyone knew it. Everyone operated around it. Everyone except one person. Her name was Yamensa. She wasn't trying to be brave. She was just trying to do her job. But sometimes, that's the thing that gets you fired. Ya had been a nurse at the hospital for 4 years. She was 29, slim, quiet in the way of people who are deeply attentive rather than deeply withdrawn. She grew up in Decatur. Her mother, Abina, was a retired school teacher originally from Ghana who had raised Ya and her 2 younger brothers alone after their father passed. Abina ran a household with firm gentleness and one non-negotiable rule: treat every person like they matter, because they do. Ya had carried that rule like a second heartbeat into nursing school, into every 12-hour shift, into every room on every floor of that hospital. She knew her patients' names. She knew their children's names. She knew who was afraid of needles, and who needed the lights left on overnight, and who just needed someone to sit with them for 5 quiet minutes before surgery. Not because it was in her job description, because it was in her. The head nurse, Patricia, pulled her aside one morning and said she'd been at that hospital long enough to know what rare looked like, and Ya was it. You just smiled and said she was doing what her mother taught her. Nobody wrote articles about her. Nobody gave speeches. She just showed up every shift, every time, and held the floor together without asking for credit or notice. She was the kind of person a place needs desperately and rarely knows it has, until the day she's gone. The day everything changed started with a hallway and a supply cart and a woman in a hurry. Vivian was running late for a board meeting. Her heels struck the tile in sharp, rapid bursts. Phone pressed to her ear. Assistant's voice talking about donor numbers. Ya was coming through a set of double doors, pushing a cart loaded with medical supplies. She saw Vivian coming and held the door. "Here you go, ma'am." Vivian walked through without slowing, without looking, without a nod. The cart caught on the door frame. A supply bin tipped, gauze, gloves, and a small bottle of saline solution scattered across the tile. Ya knelt immediately and started collecting them. Vivian stopped walking. She turned around, not to help, not because she felt bad, but because something had touched her shoe. She looked down. The small bottle of saline had rolled across the floor and bumped against her heel. One tiny drop had landed on the pale beige leather of a very expensive shoe. She stared at the drop. Then she looked at Ya, still on her knees, on the floor. "What is this?" Ya looked up. She saw the drop. Her stomach tightened. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. It's just saline. It won't stain. I can—" "Do you know how much these shoes cost?" Ya blinked. "I'm sorry, it was an accident. The cart caught on the—" "I don't care what caught on what. You need to be more careful." Ya stood up slowly. She kept her voice respectful, her posture calm, the way her mother had shown her 100 times in 100 different circumstances. "You're absolutely right. I apologize." And that should have been the end of it. Any reasonable person would have kept walking. But something about the way Ya looked at her stopped Vivian cold. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't attitude. It was something harder to categorize. A steadiness, a groundedness, an absolute absence of fear. Ya was not intimidated by her, and Vivian could not remember the last time someone in that building had looked at her and simply not been afraid. She turned back around. She walked away. But she looked back once. Ya was on her knees again, quietly collecting the last of the spilled supplies, unbothered, unhurried. Vivian's jaw tightened, and she didn't understand why that image stayed with her, but it did. 2 weeks later, Vivian's daughter Serena came to the hospital for a routine checkup. She was 21, pre-med at a local university, the kind of young woman who said please and thank you automatically and smiled at strangers because she actually meant it. She was everything her mother had become too busy to be. She got most of that from her father. Ya was assigned to Serena's intake. Routine blood work and vitals, nothing complicated. Serena sat on the exam table and fidgeted. She told Ya she didn't love needles. Ya smiled. Little pinch, 10 seconds, then it's done. Promise? Promise. Ya drew the blood quickly, precisely, with the kind of skill that comes from 4 years of choosing gentleness over speed. Serena barely blinked. That wasn't bad at all, she said, laughing a little with the relief of it. You're really good at this. 4 years of practice, Ya said. You get gentle or you get yelled at. They were both still smiling when the door opened. Vivian walked in directly from a luncheon. Cream blazer, gold earrings, presents like a shift in barometric pressure. She looked at her daughter first, then scanned the room, and her eyes landed on Ya. Recognition arrived in her expression like a door slamming shut. The steady nurse, the saline drop, the woman on the floor who didn't look afraid. You, Vivian, said. Ya looked up. Good afternoon, Mrs. AJ. I didn't approve you for my daughter's care. The room went perfectly still. Serena looked confused. Mom, what are you... Serena, I'll handle this. The voice was quiet, controlled, a blade wrapped in silk. I want a different nurse for my daughter. Immediately. Ya's heart was beating fast, but her voice didn't show it. Mrs. AJ, the intake is complete. Everything went smoothly. If you have a specific concern, my concern is that I didn't authorize your presence in this room. That's sufficient. Serena touched her mother's arm. Mom, stop. She was great. She didn't do anything wrong. Vivian gently but firmly moved her arm away. She looked at Ya with the full weight of everything she was. I'd like to speak with your supervisor, now. Of course, Mrs. AJ. Ya walked out of the room. Her hands were steady, but somewhere inside her, something was beginning to crack. 15 minutes later, Vivian was in the CEO's office. Richard had been running that hospital for 11 years. He was professional, measured, and deeply aware of who funded a significant portion of the institution he ran. Vivian's foundation had donated $2.3 million the previous year. $2.3 million. That number sat on his desk like a third person in the room. I want that nurse removed from my daughter's care permanently. Vivian, Nurse Mensa has an exceptional record. No complaints, outstanding patient satisfaction scores, one of our best. I didn't ask for her file, Richard pressed. Can you tell me what actually happened? Vivian paused, because what could she say? That the nurse had held a door. That a drop of saline touched her shoe? That the woman looked at her without shrinking? Said out loud, it was nothing. Less than nothing. So she said something she knew would work. Something calculated, deliberate, and completely false. She told him the nurse had been rough during the blood draw, that her daughter was uncomfortable, that she had questions about her competence. It was a lie. Clean and cold and delivered with the ease of a woman who had never had to account for. The things she said. Richard didn't believe it. He had seen Ya's file, he knew what it said, but he also knew what $2.3 million meant to a budget cycle. He told Vivian he would look into it. She told him not to look into it. Handle it. She stood up, straightened her blazer, and walked out. By the end of that same day, Ya Mensa was sitting across from Patricia in a small office on the 7th floor, and Patricia couldn't look her in the eye. Yeah, I don't know how to say this. Just say it. The board has requested your removal from this floor, effective immediately. Ya went very still. Removal for what? A complaint was filed. regarding a patient interaction. By who? Silence. It was her, wasn't it? Not a question. Patricia's eyes filled. Ya's voice shook for the first time. Patricia, you said yourself, not one complaint in 4 years. Not one. You said that to me. I know. Then how? It's not up to me, Ya. I'm so sorry. It came from above. Above. The board. The money. Vivian. You stood up slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She looked at Patricia with the full weight of 4 years of early mornings and late nights, and patients who called her by name and families who found her in hallways just to say thank you. I understand, she said. She didn't. Not really. She cleaned out her locker that afternoon. The 7th floor. The same floor where she had comforted patients through fear and pain and grief. The same floor where she had learned that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is simply stay. She packed a small cardboard box, extra scrubs, a photo of her mother, a thank you card from a patient's daughter, and she carried it to the elevator. The doors closed. And just like that, Ya Mensa was gone. Vivian did not think about her after that. Not once. That's the thing about people who operate at the altitude she did. They make decisions that change lives, and then they go to dinner. That evening, Vivian attended a fundraiser. She wore emerald green. She gave a speech about compassion in healthcare. The room applauded. Someone called her a pillar of the community. She went home. She kissed Serena goodnight. She climbed into bed beside Desmond. How was your day? He asked in the dark. Productive, she said. She turned off the light. Productive. That was the full weight she assigned to what she had done. One word. The hospital, however, felt the absence immediately. Patients on the 7th floor pressed their call buttons and waited longer. Mrs. Delaney, 78 years old, recovering from hip surgery, asked 3 different nurses where the quiet young woman had gone. The one who always came right away. The one who remembered her name. Mr. Osei, 63, diabetic and anxious before every insulin check, sat in his bed and missed the nurse who talked to him about his grandchildren while she worked, who knew their names, all 3 of them, because she had asked and remembered. The new nurses were perfectly competent. They checked numbers. They completed tasks. But something in the room had changed. Something warm and attentive and irreplaceable was gone, and the floor felt its absence the way a house feels a draft. Nothing dramatic, just a cold you can't quite locate. Patricia sat in her office one evening and stared at Yea's empty personnel folder. She thought about calling, thought about what she'd say. But there was nothing to say that wasn't also a confession. I let them do this to you because I was afraid to fight for you. That's not an apology. That's a disclosure. So she said nothing. You went to her mother's house in Decatur for 3 weeks. Abina didn't immediately ask. She made jollof rice and put it on the table and sat with her daughter in the quiet, the way mothers who really understand love know how to do. On the 4th day, Ya told her everything. The door, the shoe, the lie, the firing, all of it. Abena listened without interrupting, her hands folded on the table, her face still and patient. When Ya finished, her mother reached across the table and held her hand. Do you remember what I always told you? Ya nodded. Her eyes were wet. Treat every person like they matter, because they do. I did that, Mama. I did everything right, and they still... I know. And it hurts. But listen to me. Abena squeezed her hand. When someone punishes you for being good, that burden is not yours. It belongs to them. They will carry it. Maybe not today, but they will carry it. Ya wiped her eyes. What do I do now? Abena smiled, quiet and certain. What you've always done. You help people. 2 months later, Ya found a position at a small free clinic in South Atlanta, that served uninsured patients. The pay was less than half of what she'd made before. The hours were longer. The building was old. The supplies ran thin. But the patients needed her, and Ya needed to be needed. She showed up her first morning in clean scrubs, introduced herself to every person in the waiting room, and learned every name by the end of the week. Within 6 months, patient satisfaction at that clinic had climbed to its highest point in its entire history. Nobody put out a press release about it. Nobody mentioned it at a gala. But every person who walked through those doors felt it. The specific, irreplaceable warmth of being seen by someone who genuinely wanted to see you. Now, hold on to everything I just told you, because 22 months after the day Ya Mensa walked out of that elevator with a cardboard box in her arms, the phone rang in the AJ household on a quiet Sunday morning, and Vivian's world cracked open at the seams. Serena had been tired for weeks. She told herself it was the grind of medical school. Too much studying, not enough sleep, skipping meals because there weren't enough hours. She came downstairs that morning in an oversized sweatshirt, reached for a glass of orange juice, and then her legs simply stopped working. She hit the kitchen floor. The glass shattered. Desmond dropped the pan he was holding and was across the room before it stopped spinning on the tile. Vivian was on her feet a half-second later, already on her knees beside her daughter. Serena's eyes were open but unfocused, her breathing shallow and strange. "I can't feel my legs, Mom." 6 words. They split the world in half. The ambulance came in 9 minutes. The tests ran for 3 days. Blood panels, MRI scans, CT imaging, specialist consultations. The hospital threw everything it had at the question of what was happening inside a 21-year-old body that should have been perfectly fine. On the 4th day, the attending physician sat down with Vivian and Desmond in a private consultation room and told them their daughter had a rare autoimmune condition attacking her nervous system. It was aggressive. It was progressing faster than they wanted. Vivian's mouth opened and no sound came out. Desmond gripped the arms of his chair. "What do we do? What's the treatment?" There was a procedure, the doctor said, highly specialized. Very few physicians in the country could perform it, but they had identified the leading expert, a man named Dr. Kofi Boateng, who was based in Baltimore and had agreed to fly to Atlanta to evaluate Serena personally. "Whatever it costs," Vivian said. The boardroom voice, sharp and immediate. "Whatever he needs, get him here." The doctor nodded. "He arrives Thursday." That night, Vivian sat beside Serena's bed in the dim hospital room and did something she hadn't done in years. She held her daughter's hand and she prayed. Not the performative kind, not the gratitude in a gala speech or a foundation newsletter. The raw, private, desperate kind. She whispered it in the dark while the monitors beeped softly and Serena slept with her face peaceful and young and terrifyingly fragile. "Please, please don't take my daughter. I'll do anything." Desmond stood in the doorway and watched her. This woman he had loved for decades, stripped completely of her armor, no phone in her hand, no agenda on her face, just a mother in the dark, terrified. He walked over and put his hand on her shoulder. She reached up and held it. Neither of them spoke. Some weight is too heavy for words. Dr. Kofi Boateng arrived on Thursday. He was 54, tall, silver-tempered, with the particular stillness of someone who had held life in their hands often enough to stop being surprised by how fragile it was. He had performed this specific procedure 11 times worldwide. 9 successes. 2 he had lost. He didn't promise outcomes, he promised effort. He reviewed Serena's case for 2 full hours, examined her directly, studied every scan and every blood panel and every chart note with the focused attention of a man who believed that details were the whole thing. Then he sat down in the conference room with Vivian, Desmond, and the hospital CEO. "I can perform the procedure," he said. "Serena is a reasonable candidate, but the window is narrow. We need to move within 10 days. Vivian nodded. Fine. Whatever you need, name it. Dr. Boateng folded his hands. The procedure requires a specialized nursing protocol during and after the operation. The recovery period is delicate. One significant error in post-operative care and the treatment fails. I need a nurse I trust absolutely. Someone I've worked with before. Someone with very specific training. The CEO straightened. We have excellent nurses on staff. I'm confident we can. I need one specific nurse, Boateng said evenly. I worked with her twice, once in Baltimore, once at a free clinic here in South Atlanta where I volunteered last year. She is the finest post-operative care nurse I have ever encountered in 30 years of practice. Her precision is extraordinary. Her patient manner is exceptional. I will not perform this procedure without her on the team. He looked around the table with the calm certainty of a man who understood his own value and had no interest in negotiating it. This is not a preference. It is a condition. Vivian nodded impatiently. Fine. Who is she? We'll hire her, contract her, whatever we need to do. Just give us the name. Dr. Boateng looked at Vivian directly. Her name is Mensa. The silence that followed was not the polite kind. It was the kind where the air itself seems to change density, where you feel something shift in the room that you cannot name and cannot ignore. Vivian's face didn't move, but something behind her eyes, something deep and structural, crumbled. The CEO could not bring himself to look at her. Desmond looked at his wife's face and knew, without knowing the name, that something was very wrong. Miss Mensa previously worked at this hospital, Boateng continued. I understand she left approximately 2 years ago. I'm requesting that she be brought back temporarily for the duration of the procedure and the recovery period. The CEO cleared his throat. Dr. Boateng, Miss Mensa's departure from this institution was complicated. I don't care about the institutional politics, Boateng said. No edge in his voice, just a clear, clean wall. I care about my patient. Mensa is the nurse I need. Without her, I won't operate. That is my condition, and it is not negotiable. He said it the way a man says something when he is entirely certain of where the line is and has absolutely no intention of moving it. Vivian sat in that conference room and felt the walls close in from all 4 sides simultaneously. The nurse she had fired over a drop of saline on a shoe. The nurse she had lied about to a CEO who hadn't believed her but had done it anyway because the money was real and the lie was convenient. The nurse she had erased from this hospital without a second thought and never once thought about again. That nurse was now the only person in the world standing between her daughter and a very different conversation. Fate doesn't knock politely. It walks through whatever door you thought you locked. I'll handle it, Vivian said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Boateng nodded. I need her here within 48 hours. The clock is running. He shook Desmond's hand, acknowledged the CEO with a nod, and left. The door closed, and Vivian sat completely still in the sudden quiet. A woman who had controlled every room she'd ever entered, suddenly with no idea at all what to do next. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, Desmond's breathing steady beside her while she felt 1,000 miles from everything. At 2 in the morning, she got up, went to her home office, sat in the dark, and opened her laptop. She typed in the name of the free clinic, found a photo on their website. Standing with a group of volunteers, smiling, wearing plain scrubs, surrounded by patients, happy. Genuinely, visibly happy. Vivian stared at that photo for a long time, and then she let herself look at the real version of what she'd done. Not the sanitized one she'd carried in her head, a professional decision, a personnel matter, an issue of competence. The real one. A nurse held a door for her. Supplies spilled, a drop of solution touched her shoe. And because that nurse looked at her without fear, because she stood back up and met her eyes without shrinking, Vivian had decided to erase her. She had lied to a CEO. She had weaponized her money and her name and her seat on a board to take a woman's career because that woman had the audacity to look at her like a person rather than a power. And she had never thought about it again. Not once. Not until this moment. She closed the laptop. She put her head in her hands. And something in her chest finally broke open. The ugly kind, not the composed kind. The kind that shakes through your whole body and does not stop until it has taken everything with it. She cried because her daughter was sick, and the only person who could help was the person she had destroyed. She cried because she had sat at a fundraiser talking about compassion in healthcare, while the woman she'd just gutted was packing a cardboard box into an elevator. And she cried because, for the first time in a very long time, she saw herself clearly. And what she saw made her grieve in a way that had nothing to do with Serena and everything to do with who she had allowed herself to become. The next morning, Vivian drove to Mercy Hill Free Clinic alone. No assistant, no lawyer, no checkbook. She parked in the small lot of a converted church building with peeling paint on the side wall and a waiting room full of people. She walked in wearing a simple black dress, flat shoes, no jewelry except her wedding ring. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak with Nurse Ya Mensa. Please." 3 minutes later, Ya walked into the hallway and stopped. The two women stood 6 feet apart in a narrow corridor under buzzing fluorescent light. Ya's face didn't change. She didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't give Vivian the satisfaction or the cruelty of a visible reaction. She just looked at her. Those same steady eyes, unchanged, unafraid. "Mrs. A.J.?" The voice was neutral, professional. "Ms. Mensa." Vivian's voice broke on the second syllable, and she hadn't expected that. A pause. "Can we talk? Please." You studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "There's a bench outside." They sat in a small courtyard. A single tree gave shade. The wind moved through it. Vivian stared at her hands. Hands that had signed documents and shaken the hands of senators and pointed across boardroom tables. And she couldn't find a single word. She had given speeches to thousands of people. She had argued with billionaires. But she could not find the beginning of this. You waited, patient, the way she always waited, the way she was built. Finally, Vivian said, "My daughter is sick." Ya's expression shifted. Just slightly, just enough. A softening around the eyes. "Serena?" Vivian looked up, surprised. "You remember her name?" "I remember every patient's name." That sentence landed harder than Vivian had prepared for, because she had looked up Ya's name the night before. She'd had to search for it. Ya remembered. Vivian had forgotten. And in that gap between them lived everything that was true about who they each were. She told her about the diagnosis, the specialist, the condition he'd placed on performing the procedure. Her voice shook through all of it, and she let it shake. "He needs you. He says you're the best post-operative care nurse he's ever worked with. He won't do the procedure without you. He was very clear." Ya was quiet. The leaves moved. "So you need me," she said softly. "Yes. The same way your patients needed me, before you had me fired." The words didn't come out angry. They came out like something being named accurately, the way you name a fact. They landed all the same. Vivian's chin trembled. "Yes," she said, "the same way." More silence. "I know what I did to you," Vivian said. "I know it was wrong. I know there's no excuse for any of it. You held a door for me and I punished you for it. I lied about you to the CEO. I used my name and my position to take your career away, and I did not think about it. Not once. Not until 2 o'clock this morning." Her voice broke completely. "I sat in the dark searching your name and I found you. Here, helping people who have nothing, doing the same thing you always did. And I understood for the first time what I actually did. I took a good person and threw her away because a drop of water touched my shoe. Because you looked at me like I was just a person and I couldn't stand it. Tears were running freely down her face, and she wasn't touching them. I'm not here to offer you money. I'm not here to threaten you or pressure you. I'm here because my daughter is running out of time and the doctor says you are the only one who can help her. And I know, her voice dropped to almost nothing. I have no right to ask you for anything. But I'm asking. You sat on that bench for a long moment. The wind moved. A bird called from somewhere inside the tree above them. She thought about the elevator, the cardboard box, the 3 weeks at her mother's kitchen table, the tears she'd cried into her pillow at night when she thought Abina couldn't hear her through the wall. She thought about the months of rebuilding, the pay cut, the long shifts, the mornings she drove to this clinic and wondered whether any of it had mattered. She let herself feel all of it, the loss, the anger, the unfairness of it, the real weight of what had been taken from her. She didn't rush past it. She looked directly at it. And then she thought about Serena. 21 years old, sitting on an exam table, scared of needles, laughing when the blood draw didn't hurt, looking up and saying, "Promise? Promise," Ya had said. She had meant it. Ya looked at Vivian. "What time does Dr. Boateng need me at?" "The hospital?" Vivian's breath caught. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her shoulders shook. "Thursday, 7 a.m. Ya nodded. "I'll be there." Vivian bent forward on that bench and wept. Not the version of herself that ran foundations and commanded boardrooms. Just a mother. Terrified, grateful, and ashamed all at the same time. You didn't reach out to comfort her. That wasn't what the moment needed. She simply sat there, steady, present, exactly as she had always been. Thursday morning, 6:45. Yamensa walked through the front doors of the hospital that had fired her. Clean scrubs, temporary badge, her name printed in fresh ink. The security guard nodded. "Welcome back." She took the elevator to the 7th floor. When the doors opened, Patricia Langley was standing there, eyes red, clearly having waited. "Yeah, Patricia." Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "I'm sorry. I should have fought for you. I should have—" "I know," Ya said, gently, but without softness. "But that's not why I'm here today." Patricia nodded, wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. "Serena's in room 714. Dr. Boateng is prepping. He's expecting you." "Then let's go." They walked together down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the rooms Ya used to work, past the exact spot on the floor where a supply cart had once caught on a door frame and a bottle of saline had changed 2 lives. Ya didn't glance at that spot. She looked straight ahead. She had a patient to take care of. The procedure took 6 hours. Dr. Boateng led the surgical team. Ya was in that room for every minute of it, monitoring vitals, managing drip rates, watching the data that told the ongoing story of a young nervous system fighting to stabilize. 4 hours in, Serena's blood pressure dropped without warning. The monitors alarmed. The room tensed. Ya was already moving before anyone gave a command, adjusting the IV, checking the line, recalibrating the dosage, her hands fast and precise and absolutely steady. Dr. Boateng glanced over. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He nodded once. The blood pressure climbed back. The room exhaled. In the waiting room downstairs, Vivian sat in a plastic chair with Desmond's hand in hers, her knuckles white. She had sat in this hospital 100 times, in leather conference chairs, in corner offices, in boardrooms with catered lunches, always positioned above everything, always in control. Now she sat in a plastic chair in a waiting room, underneath everything, utterly powerless, and the person she was praying for was working directly above her head. Every minute felt like an hour. At 2:17 in the afternoon, Dr. Boateng walked into the waiting room. Vivian stood so fast she knocked her bag off the chair. He looked at her. He smiled. The procedure was successful. Serena is stable. Her neural responses are already improving. She'll need weeks of careful post-operative monitoring, but the prognosis is strong. Vivian's legs buckled. Desmond caught her. She pressed her face into his chest and couldn't stop saying thank you. Dr. Boateng held up one hand. Don't thank only me. When Serena's pressure dropped, ya caught it before anyone else in that room registered the change. If she had been 3 seconds slower, we would be having a very different conversation right now. He paused to let that land. 3 seconds. That was the margin. And the nurse who held that margin had every reason in the world to not be in that room today. That evening, Vivian walked into Serena's recovery room. Serena was awake, drowsy and pale but alive, her eyes open and tracking, her fingers moving. Ya was there, adjusting the chart, straightening the pillow. When Serena saw her, something warm moved across her face. Hey, she whispered. I know you. Ya leaned down. You do? You're the nurse who promised it wouldn't hurt. Ya's eyes glistened. I remember. You were right, Serena said. It didn't hurt. Ya squeezed her hand gently. You're going to be just fine. Vivian stood in the doorway and watched. The nurse and her daughter, the gentleness, the care. She thought about all the time she had walked past nurses in this hallway without seeing them, without knowing them, without understanding that they were the ones who kept the whole structure standing while people like her held the meetings and gave the speeches. She thought about what power actually was. Not the kind that came from board seats or foundation checks or the right last name. The kind that came from choosing grace when you had every right to choose something else. The kind that knelt beside a scared girl and said, I promise, and meant it. The kind that walked back into a building that had thrown you away and saved a life because a 21-year-old had asked and you had given your word. That was power. And it belonged entirely to a woman in scrubs who earned less per year than one of Vivian's designer handbags. 2 weeks later, Serena walked out of the hospital on her own 2 feet, Desmond on one side and her best friend on the other. Vivian was there too, but she wasn't walking to the car. She was standing at the nurse's station, waiting. When Ya came around the corner with a chart in her hand, Vivian said her name. Ya stopped, set down the chart, gave her full attention. Vivian had prepared something to say, and now she said it. All of it, without stopping, without managing it into something more comfortable. She named what she had done, specifically without softening. She said the word lie out loud. She said she had used power to hurt an innocent person. She said she had done it because Ya looked at her like an equal and she had convinced herself, somewhere along the way, that she was above that. Her voice shook through the whole thing and she did not try to stop it. Then she reached into her bag and took out an envelope. Inside was a formal letter to the hospital board, her resignation, and a full account of the truth about how Ya had been removed, including the lie she had told. She had also recommended to the CEO that Ya be offered her position back at full seniority with retroactive pay for every month she had missed. Ya looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Vivian. And she said, I don't need you to resign. I don't need back pay. I don't need to come back to this hospital. Vivian's face fell. Ya continued quietly. What I need is for you to go home. Look at your daughter. Remember exactly how it felt when you thought you might lose her. That specific feeling in your chest, in your hands, and carry it with you into every single room you walk into for the rest of your life. A pause. That's my condition. Vivian's hand dropped to her side. I carried anger for a long time after you fired me, Ya said. I won't pretend otherwise. There were nights I wanted you to feel what I felt, to lose something, to be brought low. Her voice softened. But my mother told me something a long time ago. She said, when someone punishes you for being good, that burden is not yours. It belongs to them. She looked at Vivian, those same steady eyes, completely unchanged. You've been carrying it. I can see that. And I think that's enough. Vivian's tears fell and she didn't wipe them. She stood in the hallway of the hospital she used to own, completely bare, completely human. Go home, Mrs. H.A., Ya said. Be with your daughter. That's all that matters. She picked up her chart. She nodded once, and she walked down the hallway, the quiet walk, the steady posture, exactly as she had always been. Vivian went home. Sat in the kitchen. Serena was on the couch watching something on her phone, laughing, alive. Desmond sat across from Vivian and took her hands. What happened? I tried to give her everything, Vivian said. She didn't want any of it. What did she want? Vivian looked at her husband. Her eyes were swollen, her makeup long gone. She looked older and more real than she had in years. She wanted me to remember. Desmond squeezed her hands. Then, remember. The following Sunday, Vivian drove to Mercy Hill Free Clinic. She didn't go inside. She parked across the street and watched through the window. Patients going in and coming out. You visible inside, helping an elderly man with a cane, adjusting a child's bandage, smiling at someone in the waiting room. Vivian opened her checkbook. She wrote a number. She walked to the front door. She slipped the check underneath it. $500,000, made out to the clinic. No note, no foundation logo, no name in the memo line, just the money. On the drive home, for the first time in a very long time, Vivian rolled down the window. She felt the Atlanta air on her face. She took a breath that went all the way down. And she began the slow, necessary, long overdue work of starting over. Here's what I want you to carry with you from this story. Vivian had the title, the money, the board seat, the speeches, and the shoes. She had climbed every ladder and won every room, but she had let herself stop seeing people. And when you stop seeing people, you stop being fully human. And the cost of that is something no foundation check can cover. You had none of what Vivian had. She had a mother's lesson, a pair of steady hands, and the unshakable belief that every person in front of her mattered. And in the end, those things saved a life that all the money in the world could not have saved without them. The proud are not brought low by other people. They are brought low by the accumulated weight of their own choices. The only relief is truth, and the only beginning is remembering. You didn't need revenge. She never did. She just needed Vivian to remember. Because remembering, really remembering, is where change begins. If this story stayed with you, pass it to someone who needs it today. Leave a comment and tell me the moment that hit you hardest. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because every story we tell carries something real inside it, and the next one might be the one that changes how you see the person standing right in front of you.